I'm going to share two pivotal learning moments I experienced in seminary to set up the message I've come to share with you today. The first came when I sat next to a Southern Baptist woman at an interfaith gathering who expressed curiosity about the foundations of our UU faith. At one point, I said, "Our tradition places responsibility for determining what is ultimately true and meaningful directly upon each individual." Her response? "Wow, that is terrifying." The second moment came during my career assessment to determine my fitness for ministry. The counselor said to me, "You are one of the more self-aware folks I've ever seen come through here. Just be careful. The most self-aware people have the biggest blind spots because they can't imagine missing anything that should be so obvious." The story I'll share today highlights the all too common example of people with privilege committing to doing the right thing, and in many visible ways actually doing valuable work, but at another much deeper level, completely missing the mark because they are unaware of these blind spots. And since we have chosen a faith that says the search for truth and meaning is a responsibility, it is incumbent on each of us to continually look at all aspects of our humanity, even those that we might prefer to ignore. If you look like me, I would encourage you to listen to this story and see if you find yourself in any of the characters, or even if you see it in your church system somewhere. Know that my intention is not to shame, but rather to illuminate. My focus today is the highly charged phrase, white supremacy culture. As described in the materials used by the UUA during the white supremacy teach-in a few years back, white supremacy is a set of institutional assumptions and practices, often operating unconsciously, that tend to benefit white people and exclude people of color. Now note, this definition says nothing about racism. It makes no reference to how an individual thinks about another person or how they treat another person based on race or any other visible characteristic. I want to make clear that this definition is really talking about the water that we all swim within while living in this country at this point in history. After listening to my sermon, I hope that you'll have an even better understanding of just how deeply ingrained many ways of being, even the most woke of us, are trapped within, how insidious these challenges are, and what it will take to really move beyond them. My story today is centered on a white woman that is an icon in the nonprofit community where I used to live. For the purposes of our story, I'll call her Sally White, and I'll call her organization dogood.org. dogood.org was a nonprofit whose mission was to help expand the capacity of other nonprofits. One day, out of the blue, I get an email from Sally. She had an opening on her leadership team, and she said that she had thought of me as a good potential fit. I had volunteered for dogood.org almost 15 years ago, and when I was a young professional looking to expand my experience on my resume. And since that time, I'd seen Sally's name in the news and knew she'd been quite successful in growing her nonprofit. I also knew that her husband had been a prominent leader in our state's government for almost 2 decades, and I felt quite honored that someone connected at such a high level had thought of me after so long. I quickly agreed to apply for the job. During the interview process, I quickly realized that the stated scope of the job was really big and that the pay was way less than seemed right for the level of responsibilities described, even for a nonprofit. I was blinded by the fact that this organization became connected to every seat of power, not only in the nonprofit world, but also in the business and government sectors in my community. The opportunity to be associated with this brand seemed too good to be true. I was wrapping up my Master's of Divinity degree and knew that success within this organization could open doors to many potential community ministry opportunities. When offered the position, despite reservations about how I would make ends meet, I accepted. As often happens, the first 3 months in the job were a whirlwind of positive experiences. As I made my way around the community and introduced myself as being from this organization, I was immediately granted a high level of respect by most everyone I met. The work was hard, but all the skills I had learned in corporate America had set me up perfectly for success. It all felt like a dream come true. But the sheen quickly began to wear off. I began to see where the practices of the organization went directly against all of the lessons I had been taught in seminary about what true racial justice actually looks like. As I shift into lessons about white supremacy culture within my sermon today, I'm sad to report I experienced nearly every marker described by this framework at play within this organization. See if you recognize any of these markers in your life or in the systems you have here in your churches. Within this organization, there was an expectation of perfection. Even the smallest mistakes were not tolerated and were dealt with through shame. There was a high level of urgency attached to everything, which led to a constant defensiveness, and each person trying to prove how overwhelmed they were with completely vital tasks. There was a deep fear of conflict, especially any disagreement with the stated direction of leadership, even when the folks on the ground knew that we were headed in the wrong direction. Rather than seen as an opportunity for the whole to get better, suggestions to consider new perspectives were taken as personal attacks and were quickly tamped down by whatever means necessary. Folks quickly learned to either get in line or get out of the way. It was all so textbook, aligned to everything that I had learned. In hindsight, the crushing discomfort my coworkers and I felt every day was the direct result of a well-intentioned leader being unwilling to examine the fact that she was driven by and had created an organization whose culture operated within all of the characteristics of a society that directly creates the ills its stated mission was striving to overcome. Now, to simplify my message, however, I've decided to focus on just one overarching theme, one that unifies all the examples I'm about to share. It's valuing efficiency over humanity. Efficiency is the hallmark of our white patriarchal capitalist system. See if this sounds familiar. Deliver products faster, at a lower cost than your competitors without exception. Eliminate all waste, no matter the impact of the people or living systems needed to deliver the product or service to market. Notice this theme, valuing efficiency over humanity, and how the following examples maintain the dominance of the white affluent folks that make up the bulk of this organization's leadership team. Note also how the help this organization provides marginalized communities seeks almost exclusively to bend their practices towards the ways of the dominant culture, instead of magnifying the strengths inherent in the cultures they are from and working to serve. The first thing that pinged on my radar, beyond the fact that everyone in the office was always too busy to talk to anyone else, was a comment one of my consultants made. She was sharing a list of HR processes that she had identified were missing or in need of updating at a small new client to improve efficiency and ensure compliance with government regulations. At the end of her list, she said, and they also include every single person in every step of every interview for a new hire. But I can easily fix that. This gave me pause. I asked, is this a white-led organization serving a predominantly white community? Knowing that this was not likely the case. No, she said, it's an organization to help new refugees fleeing from a small war-torn African country. I said, before you go in and try to fix their processes, don't you think it might be a good idea to find out the reason why they are doing it the way they are doing it? This was certainly not the last time I saw folks from this organization going into communities they had no history with and leading with a tell instead of an ask. This exemplifies a savior complex and was the approach I saw underpinning almost everything my organization delivered. The goal was to make the client organizations function as the dominant culture demanded, which in most cases required an erasure of the character that formed the foundation of their own inherent strengths. The next example can be seen in my organization's hiring practices. Being committed to diversity, there was a written policy of not extending a job offer if at least 25% of the applicant pool did not include people of color. Now, that might sound good on the surface, but in practice, it's not a very easy metric to measure. How do you know that the resumes you're reviewing belong to a person from a marginalized community? By their name? Well, that was what they were doing. It's not good. Despite this embedded flaw, time after time, even when I had interviewed strong candidates of color, it always seemed that they came up a bit short on one specific skill or experience. In one case, I interviewed a dynamic Black woman that had a wealth of demonstrated success launching new programs in the very marginalized communities we were trying to connect with and serve. I needed someone to build bridges and open doors in a new market we were trying to expand into, and I believe she was the right person. When we invited her back for a second interview, and included my immediate boss on the hiring panel, he refused to let me hire her because he claimed she didn't have the scope of a specific HR experience required. Never mind that HR is a very broad field. Never mind that each of my existing white staff, although they were all generalists, had a specific expertise within the field and turned to each other regularly for guidance and advice in areas where they had a bit less direct experience. The stated reason my boss was unwilling to hire this woman was that it would take too much time and effort to help this person expand her industry-specific knowledge deeply enough to be able to support our clients. We said thank you, but no thank you, and hired another cookie-cutter, middle-aged, white female HR professional, the type that are overrepresented in corporate America because that is the picture that leadership teams have had of what an HR professional looks like over the past 30 years. My soul died a little bit that day. This was one of the reasons that led me to eventually leave that organization. I could provide hundreds of other examples. The Black man hired into administrative jobs with promises that he would be provided mentorship and be able to use his emerging community development experience to grow his career, but was never actually afforded those opportunities once he was hired because he always just needed a little more grooming. The other person of color that had to take the bus to work 1 hour each way every day, that lobbied for just one work from home day each week, but was told that wasn't just possible given the scope of their job. Now, of course, once COVID hit and the office had to close down, it was shown that they could easily do their entire role remotely. My organization, a nonprofit dedicated to making the world a more just and equitable place, had a 30-page manual describing all the ways it fostered diversity, equity, and inclusion, yet couldn't see, and wasn't open to seeing, that its own practices were identical to the ones that were the source of the problem it stated it was trying to overcome. Now, it's easy to stand outside the system and look at it with shock and even perhaps a bit of disgust, but if it's so obvious there's a problem, why aren't things different? This was an organization filled with genuinely caring people whose entire mission was guided towards social justice, but they were still getting it wrong in so many ways. How can this be? The answer is the system in which the organization operates. Let's start out by looking at the nonprofit sector itself. Well-intended rich folks, which in this country often at this point still equates to white folks, will commit vast sums of their accumulated wealth to heal some of the ills they know exist in the world. Much of that money is directed towards specific purposes and is given to foundations that take grant applications from nonprofits eager to make their case that their organizations are the most worthy of investment and that they could convert the investment into the most good. And here's where the problem comes in. This process transfers the competitive forces of capitalism directly to the operational strategy of all nonprofits, including dogood.org. Sally White is a top-down leader that excels at first marshaling resources and then deploying them in the direction she thinks they should go. When all of your funding is tied to metrics of efficiency, you are rewarded for running your operation as efficiently as possible. And Sally is a master at this, one of the most powerful people in the community. Few within her organization are willing to challenge her direction for fear of cutting off access to the network of opportunities that she can grant access to, even when they can see that she is clearly going in the wrong direction. The sad truth about this story is that efficiency does not always prioritize the needs and the realities of individual human lives, or the needs of our community, or the needs of our planet. And we are all products of a system that prioritizes efficiency. I shared two pivotal learning moments in my opening today. It is the most self-aware people that always have the biggest blind spots because they can't imagine missing anything that should be so obvious. And our UUA tradition places responsibility for determining what is ultimately true and meaningful directly upon each of us. If you look like me and you have not taken a serious look in the mirror and dug down deeply in the lessons the UUA is trying to learn for itself and make available to the members of our faith tradition, then given the history and current state of this country, you cannot honestly say that you have fully engaged in a responsible search for truth and meaning. And if you are out engaging in social justice activities without first having done this work, I'm sorry to say that it is likely that you are unknowingly doing more harm than good in some cases. My friend that surprised me with her response of, "Wow, that's terrifying," offered me one of the most important lessons I could have ever asked for. My idealistic belief in the inherent good of people did not line up with reality. We all have the potential for good inside of us, but we also all have the potential to be self-serving and greedy and lazy and power hungry. If we truly believe that the individual is the best source of determining what is right, our responsibility as a people of this faith is to look unflinchingly at our beliefs and admit we still have many blind spots that might need to be examined. If my story and my words have given you any pause, I hope this pause will create an opening that encourages you to continue further exploration into the concepts underpinning the theories describing white supremacy culture. The systems described here did not evolve overnight and did not come into existence by accident. Changing the systems which inform every aspect of our current system will take time and concerted effort in a new direction. Here then briefly is a list of things I would encourage you to consider be the focus of your activities in this new church year if you truly want to help birth a better way forward for our collective future. First, if you are still not aware of the issues underlying the concepts of white supremacy, seek out resources from the UUA to educate yourself. Sign up for Beloved Conversations course, which is now available to all in an online version. It's really good. As you deepen your learning, the second step is to acknowledge the damage that perpetuation of these systems continues to have within marginalized communities. And this can be really, really hard because, as I've tried to show you, you have to dig below the surface to uncover the damage that is being done, even by good people and organizations that many have pinned their hopes upon for a brighter tomorrow. After the problems are seen and acknowledged, it comes time to work towards a different way. And this is where I hope the members of the Unitarian Universalist faith can begin to make a difference, if we are open to the lessons that are being shared by the emerging and diverse thought leaders in our movement. If you embody all of the markers of privilege, as I do, step back. You likely believe, based on your access to education and resources, that you know the right way forward. If this is the case, I challenge you to consider, Is the path you see forward grounded in efficiency? And does this way forward mostly benefit you? Or does it intentionally include the perspective of others that might be negatively impacted by your goals? There's an ancient African proverb, the true roots of which have been muddied due to the erasing effects of colonialism, that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Before you go forth and try to save the world, choose instead to slow down and be willing to examine your blind spots. Learn to listen better. Expand the decision-making circle in your church to include more voices, especially those voices that see things differently than you. Work to strengthen your covenants and your bylaws to ensure historically marginalized voices are favored. Be open to new ways of being. The UUA is working to make more and more resources available to help our communities become stronger and more resilient by practicing more inclusive ways of being. If we truly want to be a part of a religion that is bending the arc of the moral universe towards justice, there is a lot more work we need to do. It begins with acknowledging hard truths. It moves forward only with sacrifice, chosen because we can see directly that none of us is truly free until all of us are truly free. And none of us will be free if we are not willing to rise up against the systems that are designed to keep us all slaves on the hamster wheel of capitalistic efficiency. There is nothing easy about overcoming these challenges, but overcome them we must, because the systems which perpetuate these injustices negatively impact every living being on this planet. May our eyes be opened. May a better collective way forward finally become clear. Blessed be, and may it be so.